Thank you for watching the CEO Barbecue. My name is Antonio, and today we'll be looking for lithium in the James Bay area of central Quebec, together with Alicia Milne, CEO of Q2 Metals. Now, this is going to be a long one, so feel free to use the timestamps provided in the description and on the time bar to better navigate the video. Before we get into it, though, I would like to warn you that we have not received monetary compensation for the production of this video from the company that's being interviewed. Please understand that this channel is a business that sells content producing services to companies, which means you cannot rely on this video for research, and you should treat this as an advertisement instead. Research is conducted by reading the company's official filings, which you can find on setterplus.ca. Please only watch this if you know what you're doing. This interview is intended only for experienced junior mining speculators, because mineral exploration, development, and mining is a very tough business where failure is the norm. This is going to be a conversation that is general and impersonal in nature, containing forward-looking statements. I am not a licensed financial advisor, so before continuing on, please talk to an investment advisor with a good long-term track record, because your capital is at risk, and I am neither a licensed financial advisor nor do I have a good long-term track record. If you're not 100% sure you understand 100% of the disclaimers I just showed you and told you about, please go to the last section of this video and do not consume this content unless you fully understand and agree with everything said therein. That all said, Q2 is listed as, well, Q2 really, so QTWO on the TSXV in Canada, where over the last 3 months, an average of about 225,000 shares have traded daily. The stock's 52-week high is $1.48, and its 52-week low is 21 cents. With a market cap of a bit over 73 million Canadian dollars and almost 150 million shares outstanding, today this is a 50-cent stock with a 50 and a 200-day moving averages at respectively 82.5 and 80 cents. Now, adding options and warrants, as well as the options that have to be issued for the Cisco option, which will become clear later on. But all that brings us to a total of 218 million fully diluted shares, meaning an increase of about 47% in shares outstanding can be expected if all dilutive securities get exercised, which would then also result in about a 32% ownership dilution, if, that's always a big if, of course, but if all dilutive securities get exercised. There's no full ownership breakdown or anything like that available, but I do see that insider ownership sits at a little over 6%. Moving on, I'll be looking at the financial statement, the latest of which shows us the numbers as of November 30, 2024. The assets side of the balance sheet at the time held $6.8 million in current assets, most of which was cash and cash equivalents to the tune of $6.5 million. Although it is worth noting, though, that since the effective date on this financial statement, Q2 has had some of its warrants exercised for $7.6 million. But there's also been winter drilling going on since then. It started on February 1 this year. That's, I believe, now being completed. But the treasury is likely to look different by the time you're listening to this. So hopefully Alicia and I can talk about this later on. Back to the balance sheet, though, of November 30, the liabilities side had in total about $1 million on it, give or take, in a 40-60 split between account payables. That was $402,000. And then there was a flow through liability. So this is not an actual liability as long as they spent the money, but that was recorded at $520,000, and there's no long-term debt at all. Moving on to the P&L for the 9 months that ended on November 30, Q2 recorded just over $4 million in total G&A expenses, although that does include a chunky $2.8 million worth of share-based payments, which is not an actual cash cost. And that means that the actual out-of-pocket cost for the 9-month period came in at about $1.2 million, or an average monthly out-of-pocket G&A of $137,000. Roughly 1/3 of that, so 33% of that, was spent on consulting and director fees combined, and then roughly 42% was spent on marketing and investor relations combined again, leaving about a quarter or 25% to be accounted for by what I call lawyers, bankers, and accountants. As to the exploration expenses, those get capitalized here. So it's note 6 that provides more insight into that. And I see that, I see total additions really for the period that came up to about $11.8 million. But that does include the acquisition cost of over $7 million in total. So that's 5.6 of which was cash, and then 1.5 was shares. But all in all, that means that the out-of-pocket exploration cost was rounded up to $4.7 million. Now, the largest chunk of that spent was drilling and assays, which costed about $1.5 million, or about a third of the overall spend. The second biggest element is the $1.1 million spent on geological consulting, which is about a quarter or 25% of the spend. And then travel and transport accounted for another $1 million, with the remaining 20 or so percent being attributed to surveys, camp costs, fuels, field supply, and stuff like that. So recapping the P&L here in two ratios. First off, there's the exploration to administration ratio that sat at almost 4-1, 3.8 to 1 to be specific, which means that about 80% of the money spent over the last 9 months went to exploration, and so 20% to administration. The second ratio I have is the drilling to marketing ratio, which of course it can and it will fluctuate depending on weather and seasonality, stuff like that. But for those 9 months for Q2, that ratio sat at about 2.7, meaning almost 3 times as much money went into the ground versus what was spent on, I suppose, promoting what came out of the ground. Now, there's much more in these financial statements that you can and should really go through yourself in the context of risk management. So, as always, I do encourage people listening to go to setterplus.ca and analyze the official filings for themselves, as I'll be moving on to the company's project. The flagship project here was acquired in early 2024 and it's called the Cisco. Again, it's located in the James Bay region of Quebec, and it covers over 41,000 hectares of land along the Frotte-Evans Greenstone Belt, which, of course, hosts multiple lithium deposits. Also, in 2024 is when Q2 started putting out some of the now infamous results, which pushed the stock from about 30 cents at a given point at the lows to about $1.50 at a certain point, with the 347 meters of 1.35% Li2O in again, that infamous hole 21 in 2024. A lot more drilling and a few other things have happened since that hole, though, so that's what the latter part of the conversation will be focused on, but it does seem like I've listened to my own voice for long enough for today. So first things first, Alicia, thank you so much for sitting down with me today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Pleasure's all mine, of course, and I really am looking forward to doing this. I met with Neil during PDAC. I didn't get to
Mhm.
catch you there, so it's going to be good to go through everything here today. This is still the CEO barbecue, though. So before we actually start talking about the asset, there are a couple of obligatory smell test questions, if you will, that we have to go through. Starting off with yourself, I see that you've got a legal background, if you will, but tell me more about yourself. Who are you, and why do you think you're the right person for the job?
Oof, that's a big question. Who am I and what is my background? So I have a legal background. I've worked in the mining industry in essentially Vancouver since 2003. So we're going on just over 20 years. I've run the gamut of working for private companies, companies that are IPOing, junior venture companies, all the way up to New York Stock Exchange listed companies.
Hmm,
So, mostly in the background doing their legal work for them, being an independent director of companies, anything and everything to do with essentially mining, on the corporate side of things. I was also director of Women in Mining BC. And yeah, I've been on multiple different sort of organizations over my tenure.
hmm. Well, you mentioned a couple of independent board positions, and I do see, well, yeah, again, a couple of positions in your past. Is Q2 currently your main focus, and is it the only position you hold within a private or a public company, or how does that work?
Yeah, no, I'm an independent director of, I think there's 3 other companies that I'm independent on. Q2 is my main focus. It's literally, I live and breathe Q2 all day, every day. And as we discussed before, we're living in a global world right now. So that almost is every day, all day because
Hmm,
of time zone changes and such. So yeah, no, Q2 is my main focus right now, as it is for Neil, who's our VPX.
hmm,
The two of us are, 100% devoted.
hmm. Well, what about you mentioning Neil? Tell me more about your technical team. Who's on there, and have they worked and been successful? That's kind of it's a basic question that keeps coming back for me, and I guess it's a little different with lithium because I typically ask, have they worked in and been successful in similar geologies before? But then lithium, or the way we've started working pegmatites in Canada, is a relatively new thing. So yeah, tell me about their experience and what they've done before.
Yeah, I mean, fortunately for us, Neil's been actually in the lithium sort of field for, I don't know, 8, 9 years, maybe even more than that. He the company that he also works for or has worked for, Geological, they have a big footprint in the James Bay area. So, you know, quite a few years ago, they started looking at sort of alternative type minerals and such, and they were looking at lithium. And, my understanding from Neil is that he was going through some old reports and stuff and started seeing, some potential areas in the James Bay area to stake for lithium. So he went out there. I think he was one of the original persons who staked a piece of the Corvette, the Patriots Shakatchewinen project. So he's been involved with that since they were, I think, 92 Resources or Gaia Metals or, back when they first acquired that actual original Corvette land package. He was involved with them then. And has sort of been in the background, I believe, with them over time. And, he's actually been really good to have on our team because I've known Neil for probably 18, 19 years. We used to live out of the same office. And even the geological guys, I've known a lot of them for a long time. So, there's a good relationship there. And with them working on the Shakatchewinen project, we also are able to scale up and bring in additional geologists or additional crew that have been up there and know what they're doing essentially. They've seen lithium, they know exactly what Patriot has, and they can see, pretty much what we have.
Mm. Yeah, I hope we'll be able to get Neil on for a conversation as well, kind of the three of us, and do a geo deep dive as well at some point. That'd be great. Um,
Mhm.
let's maybe talk a little bit about moving kind of from management back or team background to insider incentives, if you will. Insider ownership, again, as I mentioned earlier in the overview, is just over 6% now. How much of that is you personally?
I think I hold about 900,000 shares, so probably about one of that 6%, maybe a little bit
Okay.
more. Yeah,
And then
I
who's the
can't.
rest? Board and management, or
Yes, so mostly board. We did a transaction back in 2020, 2021, during COVID where we the background of the company was that it was a shell company, essentially. I was a director of, there's a bunch of engineers and geologists who had this company who had, a pet project in it that they loved. They had raised just enough money for themselves to go out there and actually work on this project. So I wanted to get off the board because the company wasn't doing anything, was out of money. It won a proxy battle when somebody tried to take it over, which, winning is fine, except you end up with a lot of debt after that, and everybody was exhausted on the management team. So myself and Jody Belfleur, she's our CFO, we essentially asked if we could take over the company, clean it up, and just sell it to somebody else who wanted to vend in a project. So we did that in 2020, vended in a gold project in Australia, which brought us Simon Cohn, who's also director of our company, him and his team. They had this project that they liked. It was a gold project. We vended that in, and they did a short, small work program on it, but the results weren't stellar. But in connection with that transaction, Simon and I think there was probably about 20 different shareholders in the private company that sold us the project. They all got shares of
Mhm.
what was then known as Queensland Gold Hills. So Simon has still, between him and his business partner Grant, they still have, I think, just over 5 million shares, 5.5 million, I believe.
and then
So he's
your
got a considerable
shares.
shareholding.
What does that mean, that your shares were those bought in the open market and financings, or is this mostly kind of founder shares, or something that you got
Nope,
when
I
you?
myself I've written a check for every single share that I've bought in Q2 and have also bought in the open market. So, I mean, currently we're not, all of us are blacked out just because of the fact that we were drilling. And when we're drilling in pegmatite, we can actually see the pegmatite. It's a very distinct, it's white as opposed to the wall rock, which is essentially black. So we know when we're in the pegmatite and you can actually see the mineralization in it. So, we've been blacked out since we started drilling. That's kind of what we've done last year as well as this year. So, I do see some complaints that, oh, the insiders aren't buying, but it's by virtue of the fact that we know what we're getting. So we want to be on the right side of the law. So we just black ourselves out just for propriety or for, yeah.
It's the barbecue rocks that's actually fitting for this show too.
Yeah.
I do indeed see in the SEDI filings here that both you and Neil have exercised some warrants as well recently with that thing that I mentioned. You did do a little bit of insider, open market purchases. But once you're out of blackout, and you can also tell me when that is, because I suppose that's going to be once the assays are out. But do you have the capacity and the desire to keep buying and be on the bid in 2025 as a whole?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Neil even mentioned it on his conversation with you during PDAC. I think one of your questions was, would you mortgage your house to buy shares of this
Sure.
company? And we'd actually talked about that earlier in the year. Like, we feel Cisco is a phenomenal project. It has the potential to be a world class. I mean, some of the intercepts we're getting are world class intercepts. So absolutely, I'd buy more shares in the market.
Mm,
And provided our share price is what it is, yeah, I'd be in there as soon as we get out of blackout.
mm,
Although I don't know if we're actually going to get out of blackout because just timing wise, right now we're stopped drilling and doing exploration work because it's goose harvesting season in the James Bay area. So by the time we get back on the ground, we'll just be having our assays coming out and then we'll be drilling again. So there might not be much of a window for us to get back in there and buy more shares. But if there is a window, I'm
mm.
definitely gonna stock up a little bit more.
So you might have to put your house on the market this summer.
Don't tell my family that.
But what would you guess is your average price, though? You said, at these prices, you think it's a good buying opportunity for yourself. Is that because the price is below what you were buying at, or is it what's your average cost for the shares that you own?
I think my average cost is probably about 50 cents at this point,
Mm,
which is probably about what we're trading at these days. Yeah, yeah, I've bought shares since 2020, I believe it was, like at 5 cents when we were restructuring all the way through to, I want to say that I bought in at 75 cents on one of the financings.
mm,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
Having been involved early on, in the way based on what you've told me so far, I wouldn't assume this to be the case. But royalties, first of all, what's the royalty situation on Cisco?
On Cisco, there is a 4% GMR or NSR on the different claim blocks that comprise the whole Cisco project.
Yeah.
There is a pathway on each one of those blocks to get it down to 1%.
Who owns those royalties? Anyone within management?
No, the owners of the royalties are all the vendors of the projects. So, as I said, there was three different claim blocks of the main Cisco project. So there's a total of, I think, three vendors on the two side ones, and then one vendor on the main Cisco block. But that one vendor is also comprised of, I think, 12 different people. So,
Mm,
it's not any one person, it's divided amongst
right.
all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's nobody within management, nobody within the
Yep.
board, nobody related to taking decisions within the company. That's essentially what I'm checking for here.
Yep. Nope.
Staying on the same topic of incentives, Alicia, how is executive compensation going to be structured or determined for this in the upcoming years? Are your KPIs tied to share price performance or the size of a potential resource that might come here or something else entirely?
Yeah, I mean, our KPIs for both Neil and I, we have slightly different ones. Back in December, we granted PSUs, which are performance share units. Those are for myself, Neil, and Simon Cohn, who's a director of ours. Those are specifically tied to performance metrics. So mine is 100% tied to our share price and our share market capitalization. Neil's is more on the geology side, so his is tied to, putting a resource in, as well as some market capitalization as well, and same with Simon's.
Hmm.
We also have stock options that have been granted to, directors, employees, consultants. Um, but again, stock options don't have performance metrics. So, for us, it was more to move the company forward the way that we wanted to do it, putting in those performance things. And if we don't hit those metrics, they expire within 3 years. So if we don't hit those metrics in 3 years, they just expire. So,
Hmm.
it's incentive for us to continue pushing this forward, which, we have every intention of doing, but it just you have to incentivize your team, right? You can't just grant stock options or RSUs that just automatically vend into or convert into shares.
Hmm.
For us, it was a key sort of factor that we wanted to do to make sure that we were moving this forward and so that people see that we're moving it forward.
Well, we'll be back talking about the MRE and that upcoming 3 years here in a second. But this about does it for my initial smell test, if you will, and the incentives part. I do want to talk about your Cisco though, and specifically the background and the history of the project. You touched upon it briefly there when you gave me Neil's background, but tell me more about that. Walk me through the history. Are you the first owner? Has it been worked before? What did that look like?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, our initial foray into lithium in James Bay was we acquired a project called the Mia Project, which is up by the Cree village of Wiminji, up around, say, the 500-kilometer mark on the James Bay Highway or the Billy Diamond Highway. Um, we first acquired that one in 2023 and did a financing. This was at the height of the lithium market. We raised $10.5 million, and then it was forest fire season in James Bay. So we did no work on anything out there until we got out there in September.
Hmm.
So there was about 6 months there where we weren't able to actually get on the ground. Once we did mapping, sampling, and then we started drilling in the fall of 2023, realizing that there was, a lot of companies that had staked a lot of ground in the area that weren't potentially coming back because either they'd run out of money or weren't interested. So we started looking at other claims in the area, other projects in the area, thinking, there might be something good coming up just by virtue of the fact that people have moved on because, the junior market space, like if you don't have news flow coming, I mean, people lose interest, right? So we started looking at other projects, and we still had a considerable amount of money at that point because we'd raised the 10.5. We hadn't really spent much of anything. So so Neil actually reached out to the vendors of the Mia project, and they said, "Hey, we have this project that we've been working on. You probably want to have a look at it because we think it's really good." It was under CA at the time, and this was December-ish 2023. And they said once it comes out of, being under a confidentiality agreement, we'll let you look at it. It came out in January. We flew up there in the depth of winter. And as soon as Neil and Simon saw the core from Cisco from this work that the vendors had done on it, they said we need to have this project. So because we'd already had a relationship with the vendors for our Mia project, it was a rather fluid conversation there. Great group of guys from the Abitibi region. Generally speaking, they're prospectors. There's a couple of geologists on their team, and we were able to come to an agreement pretty quick. And at that point, like the lithium market was crashing rapidly around us, or had already crashed. So, it was a decision we didn't take too lightly, knowing that, if this project didn't prove up to be a good project, then, we needed to quickly pivot yet again and find something that would be good. But yeah, turns out it turned out to be a really good project. So that's how that kind of came about.
What was the environment that you found in that part of the lithium cycle in Canada? As in, when you acquired the project, was it a competitive process where there are other people? Was it kind of a chaos? Everyone just trying to get a project in that region, given what was going on there too. What was the process like?
In 2023, yeah, absolutely. Like it was, well, and even 2022 when we first acquired the Mia project, yeah, it was, feeding frenzy. Like no sooner did we acquire this project than everything around Mia was staked up completely, fully. And people were, either selling those claims that they'd staked or starting to do work on them, which, was great to see. It was great to see the area being that busy. But on the flip side, I mean, no sooner did the lithium prices start to come off than everybody, essentially pulled up stakes and left. So acquiring another lithium project in James Bay, a year later was, some people questioned why we were doing it and what we were doing. But, we felt it was a good enough project to take a flyer on and yeah.
Well, it's interesting how that contrasts to what's going on right now, right? Because given the state of the lithium prices right now, it doesn't seem like any major producers or anybody really is rushing to buy lithium projects right now. So, what's where does that leave you in terms of what's the business strategy for Q2? I mean, is it to define a deposit and then potentially build it yourself, or do you have what do you have in mind?
I think as a board, we're very well aware that we're not mine builders. I mean, I've only ever been in the background of companies, running companies, managing companies. Um, I think the eventuality would be to find a partner or start revitalizing our board and bringing other people on our board. I mean, all of us are more than willing to step aside of it if it means that this company progresses and this company moves forward with Cisco. It's not lost on us that we're sitting on a very good project at this point. And it's also not lost on us that the lithium market absolutely doesn't care.
Hmm.
That people are finding it's hard to raise money out there as a junior company in any space, let alone lithium. And getting traction on this project has been hard. People that get it, and other people just they don't understand, and you know, they will either take an investment in us or will buy shares in us. But I think the appetite is not there for lithium right now.
Well, I think the price charts of basically all lithium companies would agree with you.
Yeah.
You say that you wouldn't be it wouldn't be hard for you to step aside if that's the right thing for the company. What are the going back to incentives? I suppose are there any change in control fees, or what do your documents look like?
Yeah, no, there's definitely a change of control. I do have an employment agreement with Q2, as does, Neil, as does Jody, who's our CFO. But yeah, I mean, yeah, if it progresses a company and if it means that Cisco actually goes into development, into production, sure,
Hmm.
right? I'm not, I don't want to, die on my sword and say, no, I need to be involved. I need to do this. I need to do that. I mean, I'm very well aware of what my capabilities are. And I think so's Neil, so's all of us, right?
What's that look like? The change of control? Is it a fixed amount? Is it a couple of years of salary? What does that look like?
Yeah, it's a couple of years of salary.
Okay, that makes
Yeah.
sense. Um, you might want to start waving your hands a little bit now, but how big does the deposit have to get for that to make sense for you to actually be like, okay, this thing is at a point where one of the big boys are actually going to have to step in and build it? How big of a deposit are we talking about at that stage?
Well, I mean, it's still early days for Cisco. I mean, from what we can see now, it does have the makings of being a big deposit. And I mean, I can't really say exact numbers because Neil would absolutely kill me. But Canaccord has issued a research report on us. Argonaut has research out on us. It is a potentially a rather large mineralized system. But again, early days, like to date, we've drilled just over 14,000 meters, over 37 holes, and those include the vendor holes as well. They drilled 6 holes before we bought the project.
Mhm.
So, it's a simple story to tell right now just by virtue of how early days it is. Um, and it's a matter of us continuing to do the work. Like we have examples, really good examples in front of us, like Patriot with their Shakopee project. We essentially have their playbook and say, okay, this is how they got to where they got to, and now what do we need to do to get there? And what can we do? I don't want to say better, but what can we do that would get us there potentially easier or along the same path?
Hmm.
Um, yeah, it's just a matter of continuing to keep working it, keep our heads down while the lithium market is not conducive to anything, and spend our money wisely. To date, like I mentioned before, we raised that $10.5 million in 2023. That's essentially what carried us forward into 2024. That's what got us the Cisco project. And when we got the Cisco project, we had, I would say, $5 million, $6 million on hand at that time, say last year, almost a year ago today. And Neil's budget was $3 million. And you have $3 million and you need to make sure every single meter counts. We're not just drilling for the sake of drilling. You need to make sure that this counts and this is working, because if we don't hit anything within, say, the first 1,000 meters, then we need to, shut down and reevaluate this because the markets are crappy. And going back out there to raise more money is not something that we really want to do it in the summertime
Hmm.
on a lithium project. So, thankfully, as he started drilling, as we started drilling, and we started hitting some really good intercepts. And that was pretty much the game changer for us once we started coming down towards the south and, hitting those really long, wide intercepts of spodumene bearing pegmatite. That was the game changer. And that's when we kind of, I know Neil and I looked at each other and did uh-oh, what did we do? What have we found? This is amazing, but oh my God, this is, a game changer. So.
Yeah, it's funny actually how the real work really starts after a discovery. Like, there's a lot of explorers I talk to that are hoping for discovery, and then once you really make that discovery is when the hard part starts, and figuring it out
Absolutely.
strategically and timing around the financings, all
Yeah.
things actually that I want to touch upon later here.
Mhm.
But Alicia, if I say the number 200, does that offend you?
Absolutely not.
Okay. I suppose there's not much we can say that you can tell me about the about that number there again, but it's good to kind of have an idea of what you're thinking about. I think I asked a similar question of Neil as well during PDAC.
Yep.
So when though, again, that's also forward looking and maybe potentially not something you can give me a fixed answer on, but when's the right time strategically, lithium wise, but also in terms of how much more drilling the project needs? When do you want to have that MRE out?
Um, I mean, I know Neil and I would both love to have, this big, huge bank account to be able to hit the project hard, get 4 to 6 drills out there and just, come up with that MRE and put a resource on it. Um, but we're also very cognizant of how the markets are. So, you know, it will take a lot of drilling just based on the current size, the current zone that we have sort of defined at this point. I mean, right now with that last news release, we had, what was it, 1.5 kilometer um, mineralized zone. So doing the infill drilling there to prove that up and to get it to an inferred resource, I think Neil was talking 20 to $30 million worth of drilling, which is a considerable amount of money. So right now, cash on hand, we have about $9.5 million cash on hand. We're still paying some of the winter drilling. So, obviously we don't have $20 million to do all the infill drilling, but we will be going back out there in the summertime and continuing to do some infill drilling, do some additional step outs, and just continue to see what's there in the area. And hopefully the price of lithium starts to turn in the next, who knows, 6 months, a year. It would be nice to get ahead of the curve a little bit on things, but we also know that it's a fight out there. So
20 to 30 million bucks. How much is that in meters? What, 40 to
oof,
60,000?
yeah,
Something
yeah,
like that.
yeah.
How long could that take in terms of, again, I'm thinking seasonality and moose and goose seasons and whatnot?
Um, I if we were to increase the amount of drills, we could potentially get it done, say 6 to 9 months. Um,
Hmm.
as mentioned before, we do have the scalability with DeRouge Geological. A lot of the people from the Patriot Project, we could potentially tap into some of those people to come down if they're not drilling as much, or, there's other people in the area. Like, we can scale up. We do have the capacity to scale up. It's just a matter of funding wise and making sure we're spending our dollars wisely
Hmm.
in this market.
Well, talk to me about getting more dollars in the door essentially, because I'm thinking what's a good time to raise capital, but both specifically for Q2 and your plans for this year, which again we'll discuss more in depth here, but as well as the seasonality of both the exploration and the financing sector, as well as on top of everything, the money you have right now. How far does that get you? It's gonna, a lot of things up in the air. But when's the right time to raise capital? When do you go back to the market?
Um, you know what? If a window were to open and the timing was right, absolutely we'd go back to the market. Now I don't want to do it now because our share price has obviously, come off quite a bit in the last couple weeks. Um, I people say, you should have done a financing back in October when you first started announcing these assays and these phenomenal hits. Yeah, hindsight's always 2020,
Hmm.
but it's also a matter of trying to continue to prove up what we have and to create value for our current shareholders. The shareholders that we have in the company, have been with us since 2021, since we first, got the main projects, and they've continued to support us all the way through. And, they're the ones who, like in this past February, they all had warrants from 2 years back, and they all exercised their warrants because they believed in the team, they believed in the project, and they were excited. They come by the booth at PDAC and everybody's excited and, oh my God, this is so good. You guys got a good project. Like, this is amazing. Thank you for, continuing to bring us along, and thank you for letting me come in that financing the last time you did one. So, it's it's not an easy answer. And I'm sure any junior company would say the same thing. It's not an easy answer because, you don't want to dilute people and you don't want to have further dilution on your books. But at the end of the day, it's going to have to happen to get us where we need to go.
Mm.
It's just a matter of how that looks.
Do you still have any warrants outstanding?
Yeah, we did a financing last year at 25 cents a share. And that was last July that we did that. That was right when we sort of started realizing that we had something special on our hands here. That was right in the middle of hole 18. We knew that we were potentially going to, I don't want to say run out of money because we still had money, but that we needed more money to keep us going, to keep drilling. Um, we did, yeah. So we did that financing. It was at 25 cents. So they're 50-cent warrants. I believe there's just shy of $5 million worth of warrants that expire in 2026.
Is that something you can change? Can you accelerate them? Can you? I know you repriced some warrants last June, if I'm not mistaken. Is that something you can do again?
Um, I can't reprice them. Can I accelerate them? I don't think we can accelerate them without all the warrant holders approving that. And again, as I mentioned, a lot of the people that supported us in previous financings, a lot of the ones that just exercised their warrants this past February are also warrant holders for these ones. So, there is a possibility that we could reach out to some of them and just say, hey, we would like you to exercise your warrants and see if they would do it. But yeah, in hindsight, I wish I had put an acceleration clause on those
Hmm.
to force them to be exercised because that would be a nice, built-in financing there.
Yeah, yeah. But that still leaves you a couple of other options, I suppose. There's always flow through. Is that something you would? I know you've used it in the past. How have you felt that's worked for you? Have you felt like that's hurt the stock price in a way, and is that something you want to go back to?
No, definitely. I think right now we're spending hard dollars, and in the province of Quebec, you do get back a certain percentage of what you're spending in hard dollars into the ground. Um, Flow through is always good because it just goes directly into exploration work. Um, we've gotten some government funds, some Quebec government funds. They'll come in on the back end of a charity flow through, which you do get that increased premium on your share price of what you're actually selling it at. So what was last year when we did the charity flow through, I think we got a two times delta on our share price.
Hmm.
So, it's less dilution for the shareholders and the price for us is nice. And, it also goes into charities as well. So, it's a win-win for everybody.
Hmm. It, why I'm asking you this is because I'm thinking about how do you build the share registry from here on out with people who could maybe be more patient because the lithium market seems like, to put it mildly, requires a lot of patience, right? So who are you looking for essentially? Who do you want to raise money with? Do you have a target, institutional held percentage that you have in mind, or how do you think about share registry building strategies?
I mean, your share registry does need to flip as you progress. Up till now, it's been a lot of retail. And that is changing. There have been a couple institutions that I know that have been buying. And yeah, eventually it would flip to more of an institutional sort of structure where they're long-term shareholders. They're in it for the share price appreciation. You'll still get your retail shareholders in there, but I think changing the register to be more conducive to, a longer term outlook on things would be a necessity.
Hmm. Do you feel like there's room for a strategic investment and 19.9% ownership from someone? And is that something that seems reasonable to expect?
Yeah, I think there's always room for a strategic to come in. I don't know if I'd necessarily want them in at 19.9%, but I'd be, I think we would be willing to take money from a strategic because you also get that validation of the project. Um, yeah, and you also get, sticky hands who aren't going to be selling your shares and potentially being able to tap into their personnel, into their expertise,
Hmm.
right?
And that's equity level that we're talking about. What about asset level? Would you consider JV uh, once and if I'm assuming the option is going to get exercised? We'll talk about that too. But would you
Mhm.
consider JV on the asset level?
I don't think so, not at this time.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, a couple of people have asked if we would do an asset level deal, and we've turned them down just because it's, not something that we're interested in doing right now. We're still trying to actually do some work to increase the value, essentially.
So, what essentially you think it's too early for a JV, or are you structurally opposed to the idea of a JV?
I think it's too early for a JV,
Hmm.
but I mean, somebody could change my mind. You never know.
Well, that's because essentially that's the flow through in a JV is or a strategic or one of the I suppose kind of least dilutive options for you to get to that
Mhm.
40 to 60,000 meters of drilling, 20-30 million bucks spent here. So
Yeah.
um, that was actually an assumption of me in terms of drilling costs. How have drilling costs been? I mean, I'm assuming them at 500 bucks a meter. Is that something? Is that along the lines of?
I think the winter program came in at 560-ish, it's 570-ish around there. We're helicopter supported at this point, so that's a big cost in drilling is the helicopter. Um, but there is cost savings the more drills you put out there because you're not having to, it's not just one helicopter servicing one drill, you have multiple drills out there. So, there would be some cost savings there. Also putting in an access trail at some point. We're currently going through the permitting process of that to then cut down on helicopter costs. I mean, if you can drive right into the main outcrop, that would be amazing.
Hmm, that cost is going to be lower, I suppose, in the summer though.
Potentially,
Not
potentially.
necessarily.
Not necessarily, no, because you're still doesn't in the wintertime you're still flying, in the summertime you're still flying. So yeah, it's the same cost.
Well, I kind of assume because it is Quebec in the wintertime, I kind of imagine it as being a harsh environment and more challenging generally to work with and therefore more expensive as it's also slower, I suppose, to drill in the winter. Is that right or not? Again,
Yeah, I mean
assumptions, but
there was some downtime with weather coming in, snowstorms or ice freezing to the wings of the helicopter. I wouldn't
hmm,
want to personally be in a helicopter if the ice was freezing to the wings, but yeah, there was a little bit of extra cost with that, but we still managed to be able to continue drilling, so it wasn't a huge overage. Um, yeah, it's actually nice to drill there in the winter time because everything's frozen up,
hmm.
and yeah.
So you're not dealing with any like core loss or any other drilling specific challenges. It's more like an operational challenge that you're drilling with, that
Hmm.
you're dealing with.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, talk to me about that last news release then. I mean, that's essentially what we're touching upon here. Yeah, talk to me about what you drilled, what you still have to announce, and how that went and all that.
Yeah, for sure. So we drilled, what did we drill? We drilled 14 holes this past winter, 6,900 odd meters. So we continued to step to the south and then step out to the east. And then we got up and we tested around what we've called the CO2 outcrop, which is sort of along the same line as where CO1, that's the main outcropping areas. It's a very well mineralized outcrop that Neil was wanting to test. The holes that we drilled around there were just shallow holes. They were 200-meter holes. Didn't hit anything significant, but it's not to say there's nothing there. We just need to do more drilling around the area to find out where it's coming from.
Hmm,
Um, yeah, and the holes that we did drill to the south continued to hit mineralized pegmatite. So, the system is still open. I think it was hole 27 hit 179 meters of continuous spodumene pegmatite. So that was very, very promising. And I think Neil's plans for the summertime are to get back out there and continue testing. Like I mentioned before, there's only been 37 holes drilled, 14,000 meters. So, there's still a lot of data that we can come up with by more drilling, getting boots on the ground, doing more mapping and sampling. The total land packages, 41,000 hectares, and we've only just touched on like the top corner of that 1/20th, I believe it is, of the total land package. And it's a huge greenstone belt going all the way through it. So there's a lot more work to be done. Um, and just continuing to push it forward.
What do you think the market wanted to see? And because your stock price fell a lot on the day of announcing that news
Mhm.
release, was that warranted? What did the market want to see?
I think there was different market dynamics going on there. I think there was somebody needing to exit a position potentially by the end of the month, and that's what that was. They potentially saw a liquidity event. Um, there was a lot of selling, but on the flip side, there was a lot of buying that day. So, and this past week. Um, Yeah, what did the market want to see? I don't know. I mean, another 347-meter intercept. I don't know. We set
Yeah.
the bar really high for ourselves last year. So, the fact that we did hit 179 meters, we're still hitting pegmatite is a good sign. The system is there. It's just a matter of continuing to define it.
Hmm. When are you going to put some numbers to that? When do you want to have the assays out by?
Yeah, so the first four holes we announced, when was that? End of March. Those assays have been trickling in, so those will probably be in the next week or two that we'll announce assays for the first four holes. And then the general turnaround time right now with the labs is about 6 weeks. So this last batch that we announced on Monday, they went into the lab last week because we shut down on the 21st. So the geos dropped those off on their way to the airport, and so those should be about a 6 week turnaround as well.
And that's kind of it's going to be happening in batches then, I suppose. It's not going to
Mhm.
be,
Yeah,
yeah, okay.
yeah, yeah.
So it's not going to be hole by hole or half holes or anything like that.
No, no.
Okay.
Although that one, the very last hole that we drilled, hole 36, was a half a hole. Essentially, we shut the drill down on the 21st because that was the last possible day we could drill. Um, that ended in pegmatite. I think they hit 306 meters. And that'll be the first hole that we get back to and start drilling because they literally left the drill right there.
Yeah.
But that should be a half hole if and when we announce assays for that.
Yeah, what was the
But
thinking behind that hole, by the way, too? Because it's so you ended it because it's goose hunting season essentially.
yeah.
Why drill that half hole in the first place?
There was a few delays, like literally the day before. I think it snowed there.
Hmm.
Yeah, that was the only reason why they were hoping to get it all the way down to generally we drill about 600-meter holes. Once we're in the pegmatite, we keep drilling until we're out of the pegmatite. In some instances, we're not out of it for very long, which is why the holes end up being as long as they are. But yeah, there was a few weather delays with that last hole, so that's essentially why it got shut down where it got shut down.
Hmm.
We were trying to get it finished, but it just didn't. Timing wasn't on our side for that one.
You also say that Neil wants to keep stepping out. How far? How much more do you think you're going to keep stepping out? What direction gets priority here? Because you mentioned it's open in all directions now. Where do you go from here?
I think there's still some areas to the south that he wants to test. There are other outcropping areas that we just haven't had the time to get to. So I think he wants to test those ones and continue going to the east as well. We were hitting pegmatite on those eastern holes, not in the widths that we were hoping to see, but there's still pegmatite in those holes. So, to determine if there's just the one main system, if there's a parallel system right beside it, like we just don't know. We just don't have enough information.
Hmm. How much further south do you want to keep going?
Well, right now we have 23 actual mapped and sampled outcrops, and I think we got down to the 23rd one to the south, but we were to the southeast of it a little bit. So I think he wants to get back there and then slowly work his way back up. Um, yeah, there's just so much ground there that we could potentially test. And, at some point we're going to have to say, okay, this is the zone. This is where we want to put a resource on, which is kind of what we're coming to, like, where exactly is the best area to put the resource on? What
Hmm.
if we started drilling over to the east and we find another big, huge intercept? yes, we find that, but we've already started to define this one over here. I mean, it's still early days.
But are you then in that case dead set on an MRE in the first place? I mean, you don't necessarily have to. You can keep being an exploration play essentially, and just keep discovering new zones. Is that how do you look at that?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a question between the board and ourselves. When do we put a resource on it? When do you put a number on it? And it'd be nice to actually put a number on it to show people like, hey, this is what we have. We have a very significant system. I don't want to call it a deposit yet because we don't have the numbers on it, but to be able to speak to it and to get out there and say, this is what we have. This is, a big system. This is a big, deposit, if you will. And then being able to go down the lines of getting permitting done and going along the stage like you see a Patriots doing now, coming up with a PEA and a feasibility study and putting all the things in place that you need to do in order to put a mine in. Were the lowest ones, the southern ones in the James Bay area were the closest ones to the railhead. That bodes well for us in any sort of production scenarios. The Quebec government is very well aware of who we are and what Cisco is. So, you know, getting the support behind us would be amazing, and just being able to move it forward is the goal, really.
And you feel like you need an MRE to make that happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting discussion that's something I think about with some of the companies that I'm in. Do I want to see what's? I mean, is the market really? Nobody really cares about what I want to see, but does the market really value stuff like that? Do you want to put a ceiling on it, or do you want to keep the exploration
Yeah.
upside going? Because I think you're
Please.
still open at depth too, right?
Mhm. Yep.
Well, does it
Yep.
make sense for you to drill deeper given the price environment for lithium now, potentially only supports an open pit?
Yeah, I mean, right now we're at the probably the max depth of that drill rig that we've been using, or the drill rigs. They can only go to about, I think the deepest hole we got was 640 meters. That's as far as they go.
Hmm.
We'd have to bring in a bigger drill. Um, but yeah, and at some point, do you keep drilling? Do you keep going deeper? It'd be nice to see what else is under there. But yeah, that's more of a Neil question on how deep do you actually go versus, trying to get as much data as you can with the drills that you currently have. And, you know, it's also a cost thing, right?
Yeah, and an accessibility thing, I suppose, too, because you often talk about these outcrops. I believe you've got what do you have? 23. You've mapped 23 outcropping zones, if I'm reading this correctly. So quite a
Mhm.
lot, right? What's the are they all as easily accessible? Can you get and drill them at the same cost essentially, or what's kind of the again topography and accessibility there?
So where the main CO1 outcrop is, it was sort of in a forest fire burn area at some point. So there's no trees around it, but as you continue to the south, you start getting into forested area. So that area in the lower portion of the James Bay is predominantly forestry cut blocks. So you have your forestry companies coming in there harvesting the trees. Tree planters get back out there, replant them. Um, so we do have to harvest some of the trees, cut down the trees to actually put our drill pads down. So which is also, one of the things that the geologists are running into when they're out there mapping and sampling. They're actually using the LiDAR data to see where the outcrops are and then having to go to that one specific spot, pull back, all the sphagnum, all the moss on the ground to actually find that outcropping area because of all the forest cover.
Hmm. That actually reminds me of something that I should have asked Neil that, but is the thesis here that the thesis behind these 23 outcropping zones or how they got there in the first place, is it a single intrusive system? Is it one system that's outcropping these things, or could you be dealing with kind of isolated pods, if you will?
Don't know. That would be a Neil question. And
That
I don't
would
know
be a
if he
Neil
has
question.
enough,
That's
I
right.
don't know if he has enough knowledge on what's going on in that area to even answer that either.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, that would be a Neil. That would be. I should have asked that, so this is my bad. And but I'll ask him next time. You're doing what else are you doing? Met work. I think you have
Yeah.
some med testing on going on right now. Is that done? When do we see some results of that?
So we did initial mineralogy work, which just showed that spodumene was the main lithium-bearing mineral in the pegmatite. Now Neil and his team, they've got a whole bunch more samples that they've sent to the lab to do the next portion of the actual metallurgy work to determine that, DMS is the way to go. Um, to this point, it's very coarse grain spodumene, so I don't foresee any issues with it, but we need to actually do the work to prove it up.
Hmm.
And
The-
that's ongoing. So I think that got sent to the lab with the assays. So, we'd be looking at that in a month or two, actual getting results from the met work.
that's a very important thing too. I think because if it is DMS, I think that changes a lot too, especially if you're thinking about a mining scenario. So that's also where I was coming from with that question. So it's good that you've touched upon it. I did notice though that there's also tantalum pentoxide in multiple of your previous intervals. Is that also being tested for its potential kind of, have it as a byproduct, if you
Mhm.
will?
Yep. Yep. Always. Yeah.
That's going to come out then in about a month as well.
I would think so. It's not as urgent as the assays are. But yeah, it is going to be ongoing work. So yeah, I think Neil was saying it's probably like a late June type thing.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, when you have that out, all these assays and the met work and all that, how much money is it going to be left in the bank at that point?
Uh, Once all the winter bills are in, we should still have about $8 million cash on hand, maybe
Hmm.
just shy of that, 7.5. So we do have enough funding to get us through and we could do a 2 drill program again this summertime, aiming for 6 to 8,000 meters, or we could scale back. And I know Neil does want to get out there with his crew and do mapping and sampling and seeing what else is in that area. So it might be a slower start. It might be mapping and sampling to start and then bringing in the drills mid to late June
Hmm.
and start with 1 drill and then increase to 2. It's a timing thing. It's, where do we see the best bang for our buck at this point? Cognizant of the fact that, $7.5 million is, it is money that we have. A lot of juniors, are rapidly running out of money right now, and it's not easy to raise money. So, what can we do that is cost effective that would get us, more data, more information? That's all we really want is more information on what exactly is here at Cisco.
Hmm. Well, Neil is a geologist, so if you let him run, he'll probably spend all that money. Um,
Absolutely. He would love to have an endless bank account of money. And we joke about it all the time. But we're also trying to be very cognizant of what we have and what we need to do. And again, drilling, not just for the sake of drilling, but making sure that every single meter is counting. We're not just, drilling duster holes.
hmm.
Um, yeah.
Well, you've not met my wife yet. Neil has, but she would also like to have an endless bank account of money.
Wouldn't we all? Wouldn't we all?
We what does that mean in terms of again where that leaves you in terms of what work you want to do and how much you want to spend on work, how much you want to spend on, or well, when I say work, I mean putting money in the ground versus what you want to spend on G&A. Essentially, I'm wondering if you have the ability to cut back on G&A and kind of stretch that dollar even further.
Yeah, no, for sure. We've increased our spend on G&A in the past couple months just because we hadn't spent anything really. It was mostly just wages that we're spending on. And then once we got into hole 18, once we hit hole 21, I was like, okay, we know we have something here. We know we have something significant. Now we need to tell a story. So we got to get out there and start marketing. We didn't want to just market with nothing and arm wave and say, hey, we have this great project and spend money just to spend money. So once we were cognizant of what we had and we've been getting out there, we've been doing the shows. I was just in Hong Kong and Singapore 2 weeks ago. Next week I head to London for a one-to-one conference. So getting out there, telling the story to different audiences and making sure that people know exactly what Cisco is about. So if and when the lithium price does turn, hopefully everybody knows about us and hopefully we'll get, an uplift on our share price and people will be interested. Right now, people don't know about Cisco or they've heard about, that 347-meter hit, but they don't know anything else about the project or the team that's behind it or where it could potentially go.
Hmm. I wonder if they, that being, the people you're marketing to, I wonder if they care at this stage, even if they knew everything about it, even if every person on the planet who might be interested in this watched this whole interview, an hour and a half or whatever this might end up being, and they know everything about it, are they going to care given the lithium market? And essentially what that question comes down to are your marketing dollars warranted in this environment?
Yeah. I think the people that we have met, especially in Hong Kong and Singapore, those that know the industry, they care. Um, and they like the project. And I know that quite a few of them were in the market buying and have continued to be in the market buying. Our share price is, I think it's 50 cents a share right now. So, it's if you believe in the potential, if you believe that the lithium market is going to turn, albeit it might be a longer horizon. I mean, who knows? It's such a sort of opaque market that, there's people saying it's going to turn in 6 months. There's other people saying it's going to be 18 months. It's just, if you believe in the story, if you believe in the need for lithium, then yeah, I think us telling the story now and getting out there is key because you want people who are watching and who are going to be able to act.
Hmm. What are you targeting then for G&A? As I mentioned, last reported 9 months, 137 a month on average is what it came down to. What are you thinking this year is going to be?
I think it's probably going to be probably about 175,000 a month to 200. I mean, we've also started to staff up a bit. So we've hired a community relations person who's based in the Abitibi, and he's been amazing. He was born in Matagami, which is the nearest town to us. He's lived in Val-d'Or. He lives in Rouen right now. So, he has a lot of contacts in the industry, in the area, and seems to know everybody every time we go somewhere someplace random in the middle of nowhere and he will run into somebody he knows. It's amazing. It's been great. But hiring him on, we hired on another gentleman to do corporate development because, as much as I try to do everything myself, I can't. I know I can't. Jason's been great.
Hmm.
Jason's our investor relations manager. But again, we're we're tapping out to our abilities to be able to do everything. So we've started hiring people on. We've hired on a permitting person as well to assist with the permitting. So, you know, on the geology side, we're able to staff up with the DeRouge team, but just internally, we're starting to add the layers that we know that we'll need to eventually
Hmm.
have in place.
Talk to me more about the community side of things. You just touched upon it, and that's making me
Mm.
curious. How many First Nations are you dealing with across the what is it, more than 41,000 hectares package?
Yeah, so we're in the Namaska traditional territory, and we're sort of at the tail end of the territory. Um, the tallyman who has the traditional rights to the property, he was actually out there last week just before we shut down, and they took him out in the helicopter and showed him the area, and he's actually was showing us certain areas that we should avoid looking at to put in a potential access trail just because there might be in one area there's a river that has rapids that he said you should avoid that in the wintertime because that doesn't freeze up properly. There's also a bunch of forestry roads in the area too, so utilizing those to get to a certain point, like it's just been a really good relationship that we've had with them thus far, and same with the Namaska Cree Nation. They've been great as well.
Hmm. But you do have all the permits or agreements in place to actually go and do the drilling. Like if money magically fell into your lap tomorrow, is everything fine for you to go and do that 20 to 30 million dollar work that you told me about?
I think there's additional permits that would need to be done to do that amount of drilling, but yeah,
Hmm.
no, everything would fall into place.
What else does it take in terms of permitting and thinking again way up in the future in Quebec, potentially setting up a lithium mine there, again this forward looking and all that, and a bit of an arm waving here, but what kind of permitting would you have to get, and what's the environment for permitting looking like right now?
For sure. Well, I mean, as I mentioned before, you have the Patriot sort of example in front of you, like they're going through the process right now. Um, it depends on how the governments are of the day. I know right now the government of Canada is fast tracking a bunch of projects. I know here in BC, the BC government's fast tracked quite a few mining projects to go into development. So, if they can all get along and, cut down on some of the additional paperwork that's needed, like have
Hmm.
a streamlined system. Like for your environmental permit, you needed 2 years of baseline studies before you can actually apply for your permit for environmental assessment. And then at the same time, doing all the other permitting that you need to, like, it's a lot, but the sooner that you can get started, the better. And that's why, we started doing the metallurgy work. We are starting to do our baseline work, starting to get the process in place so that if and when money magically falls into our lap, we'll be able to just increase it and potentially get ahead of the curve.
Hmm. What's the state of the option right now at Cisco? I believe some payments are coming up too.
Mhm.
That's all options, essentially shares they're going to have to pay, or what does that look like?
Yeah, so we do have a cash component. I believe it's $500,000. And then there's some shares. We have to issue the next batch of shares, so that's another 20 million shares. So the total option package on the main Cisco group of claims was 60 million shares payable over the span of 3 years. We made the first 20 million share payment. The next one's due this June, mid-June, I believe it is. And built into the agreement is also that any one of those vending groups, the vendors, um, if any of them go above 9.9%, we can't issue the shares because they don't want to be insiders of us. We don't want them to be insiders. And as I say this, the vending group is about 12 to 14 people. So it's not like one person has 20 million shares. It's spread out over quite a few people. So, I think the max any one person has is probably 5%.
Hmm.
So, that is coming up in June. So we'll be making those payments because why wouldn't we? Cisco,
Yeah.
it's good pro.
Yeah. Well, that would have been part of the question because you kind of have to ask, but I do assume that you're going to make those payments, so that
Yeah,
does make
absolutely.
sense. Um, we haven't talked much about the other project. I mean, it is all about Cisco, isn't it? I mean, that's really what it is.
Yeah.
Any plans to do anything else? What do you have? Mia, Stellar, Big Hill? Any plans to advance or JV or spin out or do anything else with any of them anytime soon?
Well, with Mia, we've done enough work on it, and we actually did some work on it this past summer, just cleaning some stuff up and mapping and sampling some additional areas that we never got to. So we've done enough work on Mia that we don't have to go back there for, a few years. The claims are in good standing. Stellar, I believe the claims expire this year, and we have never stepped foot up on Stellar,
Hmm.
just because of the forest fires, and our main area of interest was that big 10-kilometer long outcropping area that we had. Yeah, we'll just hold on to it. If there was a JV partner for it, I mean, we were hitting mineralization. It just wasn't, you know, it wasn't 100-meter widths of mineralized pegmatite. So, we were hitting some nice widths, but nothing amazing. So yeah, so Cisco's our flagship at this point. The gold project in Australia. Oops, hold on a second. The beauties of working from home is that the cats like to come visit. The Big Hill Gold Project in Queensland, Australia, we've been looking for somebody to take that over just because we have no Cisco's the main thing right now. So we're trying to sell that one.
Hmm. W-
So if you know of anybody.
Yeah, off the top of my head, not immediately. Well, I don't know. It depends. What do you want for it? That would actually be my follow-up question. Like, what is it? What kind of value are you thinking of that is reasonable to expect to be realized out of these three projects?
Um, I mean, with Big Hill, I don't know how much value we'd actually be able to get on it. Um, we did do some work on it and it wasn't, amazing. But it is a lot of historical mines in the area. So, there is the potential, but you still have to do the work on it to see what's there. So, you know, some cash component would be nice, but not necessary. Shares of whoever's buying, if it was a company. I don't know. I mean, we're open to anything really, just to see it something done with it rather than just sit there.
Hmm.
Same with Mia. I mean, it would be nice to see some actual work done on Mia. Like even now, I know Neil and I have talked about, did we drill deep enough? Because all of the holes at Mia were 200-meter holes. What if it's a system like Cisco where you don't see it until you hit 300 meters or even deeper,
Hmm.
right? Like some of those big intercepts that we're hitting at Cisco were really deep. So what if that's the same as at Mia? Or what if that is what's happening? Maybe we just don't know, right?
Hmm. That sounds like a classical geologist existential threat kind of question that people get in the middle of the night. Like, oh my God,
Yeah,
did I drill deep enough? Should I go
right?
back?
Can I
What
have
am I
more
doing?
money? Yeah. I mean, at this point, if Neil asked for more money from Mia, I would say hard no. Everything needs to go to Cisco.
Hmm.
But again, if money fell out of the sky into my lap, sure, you know what? If you want to do a small, deeper hole program up there, then yeah, because you never know what's there. I mean, the outcrop that we do have up at Mia is a significant outcrop. The fact that we weren't hitting huge mineralized intercepts was kind of baffling, but maybe they're deeper. Maybe we were hitting it the wrong way. Like who knows?
Hmm. Is it an active process for you to go and look for partners for Big Hills or Mia or whatever? Is it most kind of a thing where like if something comes along, we'll look at it, but you're not really actively engaged in looking to capitalize on them?
For Big Hill, we're actively looking to engage with somebody to take over Big Hill. And that's just a virtue of, the gold market's hot right now.
Hmm.
And there's zero plans to do any work there. Um, all of us are essentially based here other than Simon. So if Simon wanted to do some work, then that'd be a different story. But there's no money to be had for Big Hill for us to spend money there, is what I mean. So yeah, so looking to move that would be great because we are paying holding costs on it. They're fairly negligible. They're I think 50 grand maybe Canadian a year.
Okay.
So nothing too extensive. But on the flip side, I think some of the claims are coming due and some work needs to be done on them. So that's nothing that we'd be interested in doing at this point.
Hmm. That would have been a follow-up question. Two, what are the holding costs? So 50 grand in Australia,
Yep.
Mia, no more holding costs because you've just updated the work, so no more holding costs for a couple of years, or well, no cost or requirement. And then Stellar, you say that expires this year. What would that cost you to keep it?
I'm just doing the math in my head. Yeah, because we staked it in 2022. And we had just staked it, so I want to say it cost us like 16 grand to stake it.
Hmm.
I don't know what the holding costs on it would be because it's not something that we've even talked about. It was just we staked it at the time because of the massive staking frenzy that was going on in the region in 2022 when we first acquired Mia. So, you know, for the cost of what we staked it for, it was a no-brainer to do it because it also had a greenstone belt going through it. But yeah, I don't even know what the cost would be to
Hmm.
re-up that for another year or two.
Not material, I don't assume.
No, no.
Okay. What keeps you up at night? I think I've been through most of my questions, but this is kind of almost my favorite question. If you had a magic stick, you could wave it at something. Let's say something else than financing, because we've talked about that at length. But
Mhm.
what keeps you up at night? What are the main risks?
At this point, the things that keep me up at night are things that are sort of beyond my control. The market dynamics, the what's going on in the market these days, the lithium market. Um, Nothing I can control though. So things that I can control that keep me up at night, there's not much. I mean, we have a great project. We have money. We can continue working on it. Um, would it be nice to have more money? Yeah, and we're working on that as well. It's just, the timing needs to be right. So, um, yeah, there's not much that keeps me up at night other than my travel schedule in the upcoming month here. I'm
What do you
heading
have
to
coming up?
London and then Nevada and then Quebec. So it's going to be busy.
Hmm. Are you doing much work over in Europe? How's the receptiveness of lithium stories over here in Europe?
We haven't really touched base with anybody in Europe, to be honest. This is our first sort of foray going over to to London to do initial meetings with people. We have talked to a few different people based in Germany, but nothing really in depth. So that's one of the key things that we're going to be working on over the next couple of months is to start making connections over there. I think I'm going there in November to the Swiss Mining Institute
Hmm. Yeah,
conference.
it'll be interesting to see what the receptiveness is going to be to, like, because I feel like lithium, yeah, well, it depends on the market really, but it gets talked about a lot over here, even in
Mhm.
local news and stuff like that. So that'd be
Right.
interesting.
And I mean, it's also the dynamics of the world right now. What did Trump just sign something with the Ukraine yesterday? So,
Hmm.
it may come to the forefront, critical minerals uh, in Europe. It may be a hot topic in the next couple weeks, couple months. Who knows, right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, it almost always seems like it is. So there's always stuff to talk about there. What am I forgetting to ask you here, Alicia? I don't want to waste your entire day here. What else did you come here hoping to talk about that I failed to bring up?
What did I want to talk about? Nothing. We have news flow coming. There seems to be this mass panic in the market that, we're not doing anything. We've got nothing going on, but there's assays coming for 14 holes. We've got metallurgy work being done. Yeah, we'll be back out there in like 3 weeks. So,
Hmm.
you know, we'll
Yeah.
be hitting the ground running.
Well, I'll be paying attention, and hopefully we can do an update interview sometime soon. Hopefully we can have Neil
Sure.
join us as well. That would always be fun. So yeah, I think I've been through everything. Thank you so much for sitting down with me today.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
And as always, thanks to everyone for watching Resource Talks. I have a couple of more things to say, though. The fact that this company was interviewed here today does not mean that they're necessarily a good or a bad company. I'm not here to endorse nor attack anyone. I am simply here to ask some questions. If you find that I have failed in asking a question that you would have liked to hear an answer to, which will happen as I'm not an experienced interviewer, please let me know and I will try to correct that mistake in a future interview. As mentioned at the beginning, please understand that mineral exploration and development is an extremely risky business. Losing money is the norm and should be the expectation. This is a very complex sector, and the performance of individual companies typically depends on many different moving particles, including company-specific factors like geology, financing ability, and many others, really, as well as particles that are outside of the company's control, like geopolitics, macroeconomics, commodity prices, and many more, most of which are nearly impossible to fully understand. Moreover, these companies that typically get interviewed on Resource Talks are in the pre-revenue stage, which means they rely on the public markets for the financing of their operations, which could result in shareholder dilution. Furthermore, as a general rule of thumb, you'll be better off understanding that all company communications online, albeit this interview or their website and their presentation and their social media accounts, or even the social media accounts which you thought were your friends and then told you about a stock, everything really that these companies do is intended as marketing. And although I do not make buy or sell recommendations because there is a clear conflict of interest given the nature of my business, many out there do. And you should be aware of that inherent bias and you should be careful out there. That bias is not always going to be clearly disclosed with everyone out there. So it is safer for you anytime you're watching any type of company specific content to approach it with a dose of skepticism and assume that the party telling you about it is biased in at least some shape or form, because there will always be a bias, again, albeit clear or not. So always ask yourself what the incentive of your counterparty is and never rely on them regardless of their incentives, but instead double check if what they're saying is true, again, by using setterplus.ca. The fact that I have no idea what I'm doing should already be clear to you at this point. I am not saying this to make jokes or laugh with myself. I just simply do not have a long enough track record of consistent investment profits. So I should, under no circumstances, be considered an authority on anything. Again, although this may sound amusing to you, believe me, it is not amusing and it is not intended as a joke. I'm simply pointing out a fact and warning you not to rely on anything I do or say. Unfortunately, at least to my understanding, nobody out there has any special abilities. The CEOs do not possess any superior knowledge, and they cannot know about what will go up, what will go down, or what will go in circles. Some people even believe that to be rule number one on Wall Street. Nobody really knows. None of us know whether any of the company's activities will result in a success, again, given that we're talking about high risk activities where most of the times it ends in failure. Also, unfortunately, try as I may, I won't always catch all red flags or all challenges with the companies. So even if I did ask a few tough questions in here, don't rely on this being all of the tough questions. Again, these are complicated startups with many moving parts, and I am conflicted given the nature of this business. Therefore, I cannot guarantee the quality of anything presented in this video, and you cannot hold me responsible for any losses or damages stemming from the way you decide to use this interview. Viewers, listeners, and readers acknowledge and agree that the information presented herein did not constitute a solicitation or an offer to buy or sell any security or investment or to participate in any trading strategy. Resource Talks and all parties involved in the management of the business strictly disclaim any and all liability for losses and or damages, whether direct, indirect, special, or consequential, or other consequences, however so caused, arising out of any use or reproduction of the content published by Resource Talks or any decision made or action taken in reliance upon it. By consuming this content, all consumers vow to release Resource Talks and all parties involved in the management of the business from all claims, proceedings, or consequences. This is all to say, I know it's a lot of lawyer talk, but this is all to say that you shouldn't blindly trust me or anybody on the internet, and you should do your own research. Once again, social media is meant for entertainment. It is setterplus.ca where you do your research. That's where you'll find the company's official filings, and I encourage you to read and analyze the Management Information Circular, the financial statements, the Management Discussion and Analysis, and whenever available, the NI 43-101 technical documents. If you don't understand everything in those documents, the chances of you losing money are even higher than they normally are in this space. And as mentioned earlier, the chances of even the best analysts in this sector losing money are extremely high, since this is venture capital and it is not for everybody. I'll leave you with one of Charlie Munger's quotes, which I wish I had listened to more often earlier on, which says, quote, "If you don't understand it, don't do it."